we're already hearing from employers of JMU students that are noting that the folks that are coming with some AI expertise are a step ahead already. And this is, it still feels like early days in the generative AI world.
Welcome to Being the Change, the official podcast of James Madison University, brought to you by Madison Magazine. Each episode brings to you stories of how members of the JMU community combine intellect with action to live lives of purpose and meaning. That's Being the Change.
What's up, JMU? Andy Perrine here. It's great to be back with you on Being the Change. In today's episode, we're talking about the university's task force on artificial intelligence. Back in the fall of 2023, President Alger commissioned a task force to explore the implications of a rapidly expanding new technology. After the introduction of ChatGPT in November of 2022, it was quite quickly realized that universities had to get their arms around what artificial intelligence meant to a learning community. And the commission was gathered in less than a year, which is light speed for higher education. For all of our friends out there in the business world, that might sound like a long time, but that's quick for a big institution like JMU. But we have the four members of the leadership of the task force here today with us on Being the Change. Bob Colvord, Provost, Bethany Novisky, Dean of the Libraries, David Kirkpatrick, Chief of Staff, and Robin Bryan, the university's Chief Information Officer. Welcome to all of you.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks for being here. Well, Bob, I'll send it to you first. Why did President Alger seat this task force, and what was its purpose?
It's a great question, and it's the one that continues to occupy us. So AI, it's not new technology. So many of us have been working in and around AI for quite a while. But a couple of years ago, there was a quantum leap, and that is something called generative artificial intelligence. And this is, folks know this largely is coming from ChatGPT, and there are some other packages. And what we very quickly realized is that had a transformational prospect to it. Most of what we'd done before was really kind of incremental changes, that we were understanding how to look at images from satellites using the computers, and we were understanding how to do machine learning. But with the power of generative AI, all of a sudden it opened a lot of possibilities in terms of both the work that folks were doing as well as what we needed to prepare our students for. There's been a real focus to think about what does the JMU grad of tomorrow need to know about AI to really prosper and succeed in the workplace that is going to be undergoing pretty substantial change. And it also is forcing us to think about how we're teaching and learning on campus, because that tool offers some real opportunities to do some things that weren't possible before, such as having it do some writing for you. And all of a sudden, we realized that we hadn't thought this through, and we needed to take some time to visit with faculty, staff members, other experts, and really start to get a sense of what the range of possibilities were, and really start to think about how we wanted to take best advantage of it across the entire institution.
I should also mention that while just recently named interim provost, Bob Colvord used to be our dean of the College of Integrated Science and Engineering, so he comes at this topic with a lot of experience. You know, one of the things I heard you say, Bob, in the past was that, like the calculator when it came out, everybody was worried that nobody's going to be able to do math after that. And you described the large language models that are available to us now, like the calculator for writing and coming up with ideas.
So we teach people how to think largely through teaching them to write. And if all of a sudden the computer is going to do for you for writing many of what the things that it does for you for mathematics and calculating, then it really does require some thought about what it is that captures the human essence in this, and that really lets us express ourselves. And Bethany can speak very eloquently about this, to really understand what the possibilities are, but also what the pitfalls are. And I think, so often, if you've read stuff in the media, the focus is on the pitfalls. it's cheating. It's not learning, essentially. And I think we really wanted to get away from focusing on trying to be the AI cops and really think about how could we proactively and thoughtfully implement this technology in a way that really worked for our faculty and our students.
Bethany, I know that you think a lot about this. The libraries, if you don't know, have expanded tremendously. If you were an 80s grad and it was just a place to study or take out a book, the libraries do many, many more things now, including information literacy and assisting faculty with research. But picking up on what Bob was describing, we're really taking a positive approach to this in a lot of ways. And how can we leverage it rather than just worry about its potential?
Absolutely, Andy. What I really appreciate about our JMU approach is that we framed this past year as a year of conscious experimentation across all constituencies in the university. And I think that was a really valuable thing to do. I don't see many other universities having done that. It was a year for us to really think deeply before leaping to policy. It gave time for disciplinary differences and perspectives to emerge as people sort of settled in with new technologies. And it gave us time to gather perspectives and expertise from all across campus. And again, not just the academic side of the house, but really all campus functions. And I guess I'll say a major purpose of the university in the modern world is to help us navigate these moments of sweeping change. And we do that by bringing together multiple areas of really deep expertise. And so through this task force, as in so many other initiatives and areas in JMU, we really tried to bring together a deep appreciation for the history of socio-technical cultural shifts. So lessons learned, as Bob says, who tends to benefit, who may be harmed. And we were able to bring together people with a passion for the future, for making the world a better place. And so really, where else but a university can you find so many people who are capable of coming together to look at and to help to guide a cultural moment like this from all possible angles?
Well, that's great. And that's kind of a hallmark of how we try to lead change at JMU, is be as inclusive as possible. I should have mentioned at the beginning that the task force included over 70 members of the university community. So the variety of perspectives was broad and deep on many different disciplines. Chief of Staff David Kirkpatrick, as a boundary spanner at the university, you have to be in contact with lots and lots of different folks across the institution, representing basically the president's perspective. And so for you to be a part of this and see the variety of perspectives, what's your reflection?
Andy, one of the exciting things of being at a university is the challenges in generative AI are massive, but this is the perfect place to address the challenges because the expertise, not just on the academic side, but across the entire university, is perfectly placed to address these challenges. When we rolled out asking the campus community to self-nominate, we wanted the entire community, even those with expertise that we may not have been able to identify, to be welcome. So that was really important for us, and that allowed us then to join ongoing conversations in academic affairs. This is not a surprise for those who are have PhDs in this area, writing books in this area, presenting at conferences in this area, but to be able to then broaden this to those who are, we have information technology, we have those who are working in student affairs. This is impacting students, quite seriously. And so we realized very early on, this was impacting us, not just for professors who are assigning essays and, right off the bat, AI could write an essay pretty close to a college freshman. So it was something that we couldn't avoid, but realizing there was a broad array of expertise here that was perfectly placed. And so that's exciting at a university because this is what makes it a unique, exciting opportunity, is not only those with PhDs, but also who are, working in pressure point areas. Exciting to see what we've been able to develop.
That's great. Robin, as the head of the university's information technology systems, is it a challenge for you to think of this as an opportunity rather than a threat?
It's a little bit of both, obviously,
Right,
Andy.
right.
But it's not unusual. It's like so many other technology changes we've experienced in the past. And we're engaged in a very large digital transformation project called Reengineering Madison that is transforming, our technology and how we support how our campus runs already. So it was kind of a natural branch off. But I see this one actually transforming the way we work potentially more than some of the others. Like Bob said, we've had AI on campus. I mean, it started a long time ago with Microsoft Word and the little paperclip. And, now we have...
That used to annoy the heck out of me.
It probably still does with some of the things. We're experimenting with how we integrate it in the tools that we already use, trying to understand the implications of it. How can we advance? And I mean, it's changing so rapidly that some of the things that my working group in the task force was dealing with, and that's an administrative focus, things we were thinking about early last year as opportunities are no longer really something that is necessary. For example, we were thinking chatbots, and now we have generative tools that will allow us to actually just put documents in places, make sure that the data is correct, and allow people to use search engines to find things that they'd have to have used a chatbot for. It'll change jobs, but I don't think it'll eliminate jobs. So people will become content creators as opposed to, do some of the tasks they had done before. But yes, it's challenging because we also have regulatory concerns. We have government that's concerned about how we implement these kind of tools, and so I'm spending a lot of time on issues like that, working with this team, trying to understand how do we adhere to what our governor wants us to do, and how do we still, take care of higher ed and show them actually in some ways we might be able to help them.
Another exciting thing I think about being at a university is if we were a business, we would need to create focus groups of young people who are at the vanguard of this issue. Right. And we have hundreds of focus groups every day where we just need to ask our students, are you using this? How are you using this? How is this changing your daily life? And so when we engage on campus, we hear from our faculty, we're hearing real-time feedback from those who are perhaps most affected by it and also those who are using it quite creatively.
You could argue that there's thousands of focus groups on campus every week, right? Yep. In class.
Yes, there are. I want to go back to something that Bethany said and really try and draw a little bit of a distinction between this and a number of other technical changes. So there's the nuts and bolts piece of this. There is the how do you use it? How do you make it run? How do you make it do what you want it to do? But then there's the piece where we're thinking about, in sort of in a meta sense, what good can it do? What harm can it cause? How do we use it ethically? How do we use it thoughtfully? And I think, and Robin can probably go chapter and verse, for most of our technology implementations, we don't think about that latter part nearly as much as we ought to have. And I think one very nice thing about the AI Task Force is we've centered that from the beginning. And I really appreciate that.
As a couple issues ago of Madison Magazine, the cover story was about artificial intelligence. And the question posed on the cover is, the future is smart. Are we prepared? And I loved Phil Frana's quote in that piece where he basically, and I'm paraphrasing, said that the things that we fear about artificial intelligence are really things that we fear about ourselves, which is, I think, a remarkable insight that gets at what you're saying, Bob.
Bob, what you're saying makes sense to me, but I feel like in this case, it was just almost a laboratory experiment in how we accelerate that process.
Oh, I absolutely agree.
And I do think that we're as thoughtful as we can possibly be about implementation of new technologies, across campus. But sometimes the consequences only become evident, many years down the road.
Long run.
Right. And so I think that's why this task force was a great opportunity for us to bring the people from, science and technology studies in the room with folks who are focused on implementation of tools and platforms from an administrative point of view, who are thinking about procurement and policy, with the folks who are thinking about what's the world that we're preparing our students to enter. And so it really gives us a chance to kind of put all of those issues on the table in a way that we might not ordinarily get to do.
Well, it's kind of the collection of dreamers and construction folks. You have to have them both.
Dreamers and doers.
Yeah, dreamers and doers combined.
And critics.
Yeah. Well, and on a college campus,
Plenty of those.
there's plenty of those on a college campus, right? That's how many of us are trained. One of the things, Bob, that you said earlier that I think is really important to emphasize, because it to me connects with the university's mission in a most tangible way. As many of you know, our mission is very benefit oriented because we'd say that we're a community that is here to prepare students to become educated and enlightened citizens who will lead meaningful and productive lives. And that being at the core of really what you said at the beginning of, really our main task here is to figure out how do we prepare our students to understand what this means, because it is world changing.
Absolutely. And I think, we try and keep that front and center in all of our academic programs. But I think the cross-cutting nature of AI is really stressing the system just a little bit because it impacts all of us in different ways. And I think it's both probably bringing a little bit of fear and angst to faculty members as they try and wrap their heads around it, but also promise and possibility. What are the possibilities here, and how can we help students understand both what it can do for them and what it can't do for them? And I think that latter piece is as important as the former piece. But we're already hearing from employers of JMU students that are noting that the folks that are coming with some AI expertise are a step ahead already. And this is, it still feels like early days in the generative AI world. But we've had consultations from folks in industry that are already putting that on the table.
We'll be right back.
Need a place to cheer on the Dukes this football season? Many alumni chapters host watch parties for each game. Go to jmu.edu/alumni to join a watch party location near you.
One of the things I think that is elegant about our mission is that it balances productive and meaningful. And so, Bob, you're talking with industry about students who come out with AI skills being a step ahead. David, Chief of Staff, was also a philosopher and is on the faculty in the JMU Philosophy Department and is also the former head of the Madison Center. And truly, meaningful lives have a lot to do with finding your place in civic society in a way that balances our rights with our responsibilities, gives meaning to our relationships to our neighbors. How do you think of the AI development and the task force exploration of it in the context of those areas?
Well, I think one of the things that's exciting, and this is what we've tried to do at JMU, we just rolled out a new civic leadership minor, for example, and we have had the most interest in the minor among those disciplines that you might not think of first, not among necessarily, and we had a lot of interest, political science, history, but also in business and in the hard sciences and others, because no one is confused that in our political environment that every area is going to be impacted by a change. I mean, if you're starting a business in Florida or Texas today, if you're starting you're going to have to deal with a changing policy landscape. You're going to have to engage with our elected leaders. And so we're preparing students for those dynamic conversations. Government policy, I think we are also, government policy is always slow to adapt to. You think about how late, for example, in our country, child labor laws, were developed after Industrial Revolution. When we think about things like truck drivers, which is the single most common occupation in the U.S., and generative AI and developments in automated, things that are happening with Tesla and autonomous cars, that is going to fundamentally change, that industry. And so I think there's big questions about what is the role of government in protecting certain industries. The other thing I would add is, not only that all of these connect our engagement as an engaged society, is that we don't know where the jobs are going to be, and we don't know necessarily if AI tells us anything, it's that we can't just pair ourselves onto industry, because industry isn't where it's going to be now, in 50 years. And so we hear that a lot in higher education, that you need to just look at exactly what industry needs now, prepare people for that exact thing, and then you're going to be great. And this is a great example where We can't do that, and we will not serve society best if we're not giving them. This is why everyone around this table is passionate about liberal arts education. This is why we need to train students in history and philosophy as well as in engineering and these other areas, because we don't know where the jobs are going to be, but we do know how to help students think through being critical thinkers, thinking through how to work on a team, those types of things that we're passionate about here at JMU. So we think that the skills that you need to be an engaged citizen are exactly the skills that industry needs as well. And those are also the transferable skills for our students' 20th and 30th job, not just their first job that might change drastically from today to 25 years from now.
We often describe that as preparing them not for their first job, but for their third career.
Which a lot of students are on in their 20s.
Yes.
It's remarkable how fast things are changing. Well, this is all very fascinating, and one of the things I see as somebody who's been part of this community for a long time is that the speed with which the task force has delivered some preliminary findings is remarkable. The task force met in the fall of 23 and had its preliminary report out in February of 24, and then reported to the Board of Visitors in April, and then provided another report basically foreshadowing next steps. Bob, you likened the process to a rapid software development where it's a more iterative process than boil the ocean and then come back with an answer.
That's exactly right. And we felt like that was really important given the pace of technological change, because we could get lapped multiple times in this particular race. I will say one thing on the faculty front that is going to be and faculty and student front is going to be a focus in the upcoming year, is really to try and develop some rules of the road for faculty and student engagement in the classroom, and to try and provide some guidance so that students can go from class to class and have some sense of what's in bounds and what's out of bounds in terms of the use of AI. And we really need to have some more conversation about that, because I think folks, as Bethany mentioned earlier, folks spent the last year experimenting. I think now it's time to take stock of those experiments and see if we can start to coalesce, at least in a general way. This will vary, discipline by discipline. But I think we're ready to start to have those conversations, and those will start in September.
And the library is going to play a critical role in sort of being the glue between a lot of all that, not only for faculty as a resource, but students come to you for everything from information literacy to maker spaces. So what's the library's role going to be in this?
Yeah, we frequently wind up performing that function because we're really special as a library system here at JMU in that we include instructional technology, instructional design, ed tech, classroom technology in all the functions of a big modern complex library system that you might think of ordinarily as focused on providing access to research resources and so forth. So the libraries will have a big role to play here. Data literacy, information literacy really is our bread and butter, both in helping faculty bring those concepts into all the different disciplinary domains and helping students grapple with change. I'll just add that as we're moving out of this year of conscious experimentation into some more clarity on next steps and guidance, we're also thinking about how to use across campus our existing structures well. So we're not needing to reinvent the wheel just to grapple with AI. Andy, you highlight that libraries have a role here to play, information technology has a role here to play, but also our general education program and the way that we focus on information and data literacy for students there, all of our civic engagement programs, as David was highlighting, are going to be crucial here.
Well, since we are discussing this process as a year of conscious experimentation and then another year of making things solid, I'm going to consider this episode to be a preview of another episode, if the four of you wouldn't mind.
Well, if you'll have us back.
Yes, I'll have you back. And I think probably in the fall semester or the spring semester, because I'm sure that our listeners are going to be very curious about the results of this task force. It's still a bit formative.
Well, we're really curious too, Andy.
Yeah, right. Well, it's part of the fun, right?
Indeed it is.
That's why it's nice to be on a college campus. So We'll have you back soon. This has been incredibly elucidating for our listeners. And remember out there, if you have any ideas for the Being the Change podcast, contact us at beingthechange@jmu.edu. David, Bethany, Bob, and Robin, I thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much.
Thank
This
you.
was fun.
Thanks, Andy. It's a blast.
You bet.
Thanks for listening. Tune in next time to hear another story of how members of the James Madison University community are being the change. Dive deeper and consume countless other stories at jmu.edu/Madison Magazine. Go Dukes!
The Being the Change podcast was conceived by Jim Heffernan, editor of Madison Magazine, and me, Andy Perrine, head of JMU Marketing. Thanks to Jenna Polk and the team at Rose Library Studios, where the show is recorded by Steve Adderton, the guy who also captures those amazing campus drone shots you see on Instagram. Original music and episode production by Neil Perrine. All of us involved in creating Being the Change are JMU alumni, and we bleed purple. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.